Hi, I'm Chike Coleman. This is Real Reviews of the Cinematic Underground, the show where we talk about movies that are in theaters, on DVD, and sometimes we talk about TV shows. This week we're going to be discussing two films, The Gift and The Visit. Both films are unique for what they bring to cinema in general, and they're directed by M. Night Shyamalan, and I'm going to mess this guy's name up.
Joel Edgerton.
Joel Edgerton. And they're really fantastic films, and I want to start off today's episode, Chuck, if you don't mind, discussing the idea of a specific type of film that audiences have seen for years, but really not really had a term for it. Last night, after seeing The Gift and The Visit, I now can coin the term properly, and it's something that I think started with, fittingly enough, M. Night Shyamalan, and that is the penny dropper film. So the idea behind the penny dropper film is this. You go into a story with a protagonist or a main character not knowing a very specific piece of information. You hide it behind suspense and horror and fear, and then at some point in the beginning of the third act, you drop this bit of knowledge that basically changes everything you've seen so far. And the best kind of penny dropper film is the kind where you have the character reacting to that penny dropper moment and really allowing that to build the tension of the film. Bad penny dropper films just give you that little revelation and end the film. Because it really doesn't leave you wanting more, it just leaves you with questions you want to answer. At least that's my opinion. Do you agree with my assessment of what this subgenre is? Do you believe that it exists?
Yes.
What are some good examples of what I would call penny dropper films for you, Chuck?
Psycho comes to mind. I think that's probably the most famous one I can come up with off the top of my head. And Hitchcock was a master at turning things around, making you think, one thing is happening in the plot, and then he gives you a left turn. And as you just said, you have to reevaluate everything you've seen, and it casts everything in a new light. I think he was the master of that, as far as the golden age of Hollywood and movies throughout the 50s.
I would agree completely. The movie that comes to mind most for me, and the one that would permeate with people of my era, would probably be The Sixth Sense.
Mm-hmm.
You start reevaluating everything you saw in the last 60 to 70 minutes and say, well, how does this change what I know? And then you realize, oh, this changes everything I know. And I think that's what makes these films beautifully unique, and something that makes the two films we're talking about today unique, interesting, fascinating, and something that deserves, I would say, multiple viewings. I don't know if you'll agree with that. We'll try and discuss that as we go along. So the first film I want to talk about today is The Gift, directed and written by Joel Edgerton, starring Jason Bateman, and I forget the woman's name. Is it? It's not Jennifer Connelly, is it?
No. Keep going. I'll think
So the film talks about the idea that
Rebecca Hall
talks about the idea that you have Jason Bateman's character Simon and his lovely wife. They have just moved to a new estate and city for Simon's job. They're going shopping for all sorts of things. You can tell that there's an undercurrent of emotional distress within this couple. They're unpacking. They're still trying to get settled in. While they're out shopping one day, they meet Gordon. Gordon was a former classmate of Simon's.
Played by Edgerton.
Who basically tries to strike up a friendship. And in a sense, it kind of weirds Simon out initially, but he kind of dismisses it. All of a sudden, these gifts start showing up on their front door, and you get this idea that Edgerton's character of Gordon and Gordo is trying to really build a bridge with Simon, and Simon doesn't want any of it because it reminds him of the past. We don't know what that past entails, but as more gifts keep showing up, Simon becomes uncomfortable because he feels like Gordo is after his wife or after his life, so he ends the friendship. Suddenly, those gifts start coming to him in different forms of death or destruction. And as the film progresses, you learn things about Gordo and things that happen in Gordo's past, as well as other things that I can't detail in this initial story preview. But suffice to say, it is absolutely fascinating to watch Simon and his wife Robin go through the struggle of trying to understand
Yeah.
and deal with everything regarding what Gordo does and does not do to them. It's a very intriguing portrait in uncomfortable unease in terms of thrillers, and it really kind of pushes the film to a unique form of suspense that I haven't seen in years. And it's just a great film and expertly directed, I believe, by Edgerton, and features a penny dropper moment that's not to be forgotten. Chuck, what did you think of The Gift?
I think it's one of the best things I've seen this year. You rarely get something that is this intelligently written. It takes one big leap of faith on the audience part. He asks you to make that one big leap only once. But the rest of it, I think, proceeds at a very logical, sensical manner. And that, I think, is one of the trickier things that you have to do with making a film like this. You've got to really adhere to certain rules so that the audience doesn't feel as though they've been cheated or that you're insulting them. And this movie does that, I think, other than this one big leap of faith that's required. But it's not too large, and I readily accepted the circumstances that were going on. What I liked about the film is that you think you know all three of these people at the beginning. You think back to other movies that you've seen, and automatically you're throwing stereotypes at these characters. Oh, that guy's this way, she's this way, she's that. But as we go along, your perception of all three of them changes. And that's, I think, one of the coolest things about it. Suddenly, you're looking, as you're saying, not just at the situation differently, but at all three of these people differently. And again, that is very logically explained as well. So it's not a dumb movie by any stretch. It plays fair, and the twist you don't see coming, and it is devastating.
And the thing is, once they give you the twist, and this is where the penny dropper idea comes in, they don't stop there. That they keep ratcheting up the tension. And just because you know the twist doesn't mean you know the full circumstances of what went on. You really don't get that until maybe the last 10, 20 minutes. And then when you know everything, then that really changes everything you know about these characters. And like you said, that makes them very unique. And no character in this film, I would argue, is weak.
No, not at all. Not at all. And I love the ending because Edgerton does to us exactly what his character has done to the people in the movie, leaving this seed in our minds to mull over and twist around and try to come to some conclusions with. And that's the whole point, that inability to reach a definitive answer to the situation he presents us and his characters. I love that he puts us in that situation. Just really, really well done. And I'm hoping maybe he's going to get some recognition for screenplay here as we get to award season, because I think it's really sharp.
I would hope so. And I feel like the direction was incredibly tight. The music was only really used when absolutely necessary, which I always complain about that in horror films. And it was just fantastically done. The next film, which I'm hoping you'll intro for us, that I want to talk about, is M. Night Shyamalan's return to the horror genre with The Visit. Can you let the audience in on the plot behind The Visit and your thoughts?
if you've read a fairy tale, then you know what The Visit is about, because that's basically what it is. It's an updated fairy tale about a brother and sister, one in their sister's in the late teens, the boy's in his early teens, and they're going to go visit Grandpa and Grandma. They've never met Grandpa and Grandma. Their mother had a falling out with them some 15, 20 years ago, and out of the clear blue sky, Grandpa and Grandma have called Mom and said, hey, can we see our grandchildren? Mom seems to think that perhaps this is the first step towards some reconciliation, so she packs up the kids and they get on the train and away they go out to Grandpa and Grandma's house in the country. It's a found footage film, and the explanation as to why it's shot in this way is that the older character, Becca, the older girl, wants to be a filmmaker. And she decides she's going to make a documentary about this experience, so she brings along her camera to film everything, as well as her laptop computer, which comes in very handy when she has to Skype Mom. We get out there, they're going to spend a week with Grandpa and Grandma, and everything seems to get off to a pretty good start. But as every day and every night goes by, seem to find out that Grandpa and Grandma aren't quite what they appear to be. There's something not quite right about them. Their behavior is not normal and seems to be getting worse, and the kids feel very, very trapped and threatened by the time this thing all comes to an end.
For me, I felt like the Becca character was the strongest character in the film. She also, to me, is kind of M. Night Shyamalan in protagonist form, because she has set up shots that she has her brother participate in, who is 13, and all he cares about is girls, whatever he thinks.
And composing the world's worst raps.
And composing the world's worst raps. And they're horrible. I have a special favorite moment within that film where he says he's going to replace all of the curse words in the English language with the names of current pop stars. And at no point does that ever come more in handy than when he is frightened. And those are hilarious moments. There's a lot of tension here as well, much like The Gift, but it's framed in a way of looking at oddities rather than looking at what we fear about other people, in the sense of you see actions take place and you see Becca and her brother's reactions to those actions, and their alarm is also your alarm. And that's what I think is most effective about this film. It doesn't play on fears of things we know. It plays on fears of things we see in front of us and why that might scare us rather than, oh, here's a scary thing we're looking at. And I think that is a very smart and wise choice by Shyamalan, one of the wisest he's made in the horror genre in years, I would say, because you're not playing on our imagination. You're showing us something and not telling us to be scared, but telling us, or asking us rather, how would you feel if you saw this? And
okay, I wasn't quite sure where you're headed with this, but now I see what you're doing.
And that, in a sense, is what creates our fear throughout this film, is you see Becca and her brother get into various situations where they're in dark and closed spaces, and while that's supposed to be scary, what's scary is what they see and what answers Becca is trying to find from the incident that happened 20, 30 years ago with her mom and the grandparents. And as usual in our theme today, the penny does drop on something very important. And from that moment on, everything changes. And I think that's what makes The Visit such a fascinating destination at the movies this week. Chuck, what did you think about The Visit?
I liked it for another reason. I read an interview with Shyamalan, and he said that his first cut of the movie was a straight comedy, and his second cut was a straight horror film, and that what we're seeing in the theaters, he says, is a combination of both. And I liked that because it is incredibly hard to do. It's incredibly hard to be able to shift tones as he does here, because you are laughing at 1 minute, and he has your defenses down when you're laughing, and then he nails you. And I thought that was very well done. And again, it's not easy to do. There are a couple moments, I mean, I never thought the word Yahtzee would be so horrifying and hilarious at the
Yeah.
same time until I saw this movie. And I really like the fact that you're right about her, and I like the kid too. I don't know his name, but I know he was an Alexander in the no good, crappy, awful God,
Yeah.
day. He's good too. You really like these kids.
You do.
And you're hoping that everything's going to turn out, and that's so important with a horror film. We see so many bad horror films where you can't wait for them to get killed. They're disposable. There's no, when you're invested on the other side, that's not necessarily what you want.
Yeah.
You're really hoping these kids are okay. And once that twist is revealed, I loved that.
Oh, yeah.
Because it was like, oh,
Why didn't we?
I should have,
Why didn't we
figured
think
this
about
out.
this?
This all makes sense now.
Yeah.
And that last, you say, once we know, that last half hour is great.
Yeah.
Because, boy, he's really pulling out all the stops. Not just with the scares, but there are some wonderfully funny moments there,
Yeah.
too. So I really like this. And I see what you're saying, though, about what you were saying about the known and the unknown, because you're right, like with Signs. We really don't see much of anything in that film.
Yeah.
And we have all these questions. And I always thought that was kind of a letdown. But he's always been very good at creating a good atmosphere. And here he has that, but as you're saying, we're questioning everything that we're seeing. And getting no really good answers to it
Is the
until
thing
we
that
get
creates
to
our fear, yeah.
until we get the solution or the knowledge that we've been remiss in. I guess I shouldn't pick it apart too much, because I'm also thinking about the end and cell phone coverage and a single cop in a town thing, but we'll let that go, because I was having too much fun.
Yeah. For me, I have two favorite moments in this film. One is a very, very hilarious moment off of something very gruesome that occurs. I'm referring to the refrigerator and the celebration afterwards.
Yes, okay.
Hilarious. And I'm also referring to the idea of something that happens when the brother turns the camera on Becca. The revelation we get there is to me the most powerful moment in the entire movie.
Yeah, and this young girl, I looked her up. She hadn't done much of anything. I want to see what this actress does next, because she's really good.
She's fantastic.
Really good.
Well, we cannot reveal the conceits of either film. We can say one thing for certain. Both films are worth seeing while they're at the theaters. You
Definitely.
need to see these movies, even if you don't like horror films.
Yeah, and I want to say with The Visit, I think that one's going to be better with a crowd, too.
Yeah.
You go to a theater, packed theater with a bunch of strangers. I mean, because not only will you be, unnerved together, but also laughing together. It's a good group experience.
It very much is. Are there any films that you would recommend other than those two for this week?
Other than those for this week. No, we're kind of in a fallow period right now. I know that the Art Theater uptown is still doing interesting things, as they always do. They have a documentary up there called Meru about a mountain climbing expedition that I have not seen, but I've read great reviews of. They also have a great documentary up there called Best of Enemies about a series of debates between Gore Vidal and William F. Buckley that occurred in 1968. Very fascinating movie. I had no idea these debates actually occurred. So it was something of an education for me. And the director says that this is really the beginning of the reality TV movement, because these debates that these two men were involved with soon devolved into personal attacks on each other.
Yeah.
And it becomes quite fascinating when you see the facade of both these guys fall away, and it really was reality television, because no holds were barred at that point, and these guys were duking it out verbally in a way that wasn't scripted and very effective. And another good movie up at the Art, Phoenix.
Yeah, I heard a lot about Phoenix.
The World War II, or post-World War II drama, I should say, about the woman who survives a concentration camp and gets facial reconstructive surgery afterwards because she's suffered a pistol wound to the face. She goes to find her husband. Her husband does not recognize her, but says, hey, you know what? You look enough like my wife, and she's loaded, and her family's dead. If you could pretend to be my wife, let's go get her money. Not knowing that it is in fact her wife that he is speaking to, and she has held back that key bit of information. A ridiculous plot, but where we go with it there really has a lot of impact and a lot to say about what we as human beings react to as far as guilt, revenge, and other motivations of a very base quality. So we're waiting, I think, a little bit for things to pick up here. Next week, things will pick up with the Everest film,
Yes.
with the Jake Gyllenhaal, with Johnny Depp in Black Mass.
Which should be interesting.
Yeah, so I think that we'll steadily get a couple good ones here and there before we get the glut of Oscar bait stuff come mid-November and into the rest of the year.
One thing I do want to talk about in terms of television is we've got a lot of great things coming up for the fall. Of course, you and I have our love for The Flash, and I've seen promos for that, and it looks extraordinary. We've got Jay Garrick finally coming into the fold. In Arrow's coming back, and that's finally headed towards the Green Arrow comic book mythology a bit now. We're finally getting Green Arrow rather than Arrow. So that should be nice and interesting to view. Gotham is also coming back, and that is supposed to be named The Rise of the Villains this year, and we're going to have the return of the possible Joker character, as well as other alliances between other villains that should be quite interesting. Is there any shows in the fall that are new that you're interested in?
I guess just to keep with the superhero theme, I'm looking forward to Supergirl. The promos I've seen of that look like a lot of fun.
Have you seen the pilot?
I have not. I don't want to. I'm waiting.
Okay, fair enough. I have seen the pilot, so once you do see the pilot, we can have a discussion about Supergirl. I'm excited for one other show this year, and that is Quantico. It's supposed to be about a woman who wakes up after a natural disaster occurs, and she's a newly bred FBI agent for the training program Quantico, and she's trying to figure out who framed her for this big disaster that she was a part of, apparently. So that looks intriguing to me. Other than that, everybody else has got their usual Grey's Anatomy, Dancing with the Stars, American Idol went in its last season. Nothing else that really strikes my fancy, but Quantico does. Supergirl might if I see episode 2 and it intrigues me enough.
And I'm looking forward to The Last Man on Earth coming back.
Which I still need to see. How many episodes is that?
I think it's only 10 or 12, but they're each only a half hour, and once you take out the commercials, they're like 24 minutes.
Okay.
You can catch up in an afternoon, and it is quite fun.
Okay, let's plan on talking about that as well as Black Mass next week,
Okay.
and we will see you next week. Talk to you guys later. Bye.